Hey everybody, it's me, JTJ. Today I'm going to be telling you the story of the Sprouts Farmers Market Odyssey. So, I'm going to set this story by telling you the year and I can't really tell you the month because for the life of me, I can't remember to this day what month it was. So, try to keep up with this story, and if you can, maybe you can figure out what month it was. Who knows? So, it's 2015, and I am 21 years old. And I want to go into a little backstory, if I will, about how I even acquired this job. So, as you should all know, I am autistic, and there was this program that helps people with autism in Tucson. Basically, it was a program that helped us find jobs, and I'll tell you this story about me looking for jobs on another day. Another story. I feel that's a story all for its own. But for right now, we're going to mainly focus on Sprouts. And the day I interviewed for Sprouts, the guy who was helping me train for finding a job, basically, came to me to the interview, and I was very optimistic about this job when I first started. But we'll get into that later. Basically, what happens is, I'm getting interviewed, and it's going so well. Even after this part in the interview where they asked me, do you know what a courtesy clerk does? And what pops into my head, because I'm 21 years old, and not too long ago, I recently got really into Kevin Smith films. And one of the films was Clerks. So what popped into my head was the clerks from the movie Clerks. And I didn't want to answer and say the dumb thing. So what I said was, and this is a long pause in the interview, mind you. I said, I'm not entirely sure what a courtesy clerk does. I was trying to be very, very careful for this interview. And by the end of it, the manager, I'm not going to say her name, but she was very nice. She said to me, I'm going to take a chance on you. And she meant it in a sincere way, not I'm going to take a chance on you. You look stupid, but I'm going to take a chance on you. No, she meant it in a sincere way. Like, she knew there was something about me and how I was perfect for the job. And at the time, I thought I was perfect for the job. Eventually, she was no longer manager, but I'm not going to get too into that end of the story. She kind of faded away, and she wound up working somewhere else as a manager, luckily. She landed on her feet. She worked at Sprouts since the time that it used to go by Sunflower. So she'd been there for 25 years when she hired me. But I'm going to get into the drug test, and there's a story about that. So, the day before the drug test, for me, it was the Super Bowl party, and all week, because I knew I was going to be getting a drug test, I wanted to be super careful, so I did not drink any alcohol, just in case, in case that popped up. Didn't want them to think I was a drunk, you know what I mean? Not that I was an alcoholic, but it was a rough week going without alcohol as a 21-year-old who newly started drinking. But we'll get into that later. So it's the Super Bowl, and I'm at my friend Kyle's house watching it, and what happens is his cousin kind of was blowing smoke into my face, and it wasn't cigarette smoke, it was Well, you can guess what kind of smoke it was. I won't say for sure what it is, but I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with need. But I asked him, could you please not blow that smoke in my face? And then Kyle's brother, straight up, takes a puff of it, and then he just blows it right in my face. Like, he gets right in my face and blows it at me. And I'm like, what the fuck? That ain't cool, man. I mean, I had a drug test, and I didn't want that. And here's a funny story. I take the drug test, and here's how they do it. They don't make you pee. They actually swab your mouth. So the fact that he blew in my mouth was scary to me. I mean, I brushed my teeth, of course, that morning. But still, who knows what could have happened? I was lucky to get this job, it seemed like. I mean, it's not like I guess I could have got high off a second-hand marijuana, right? I was probably paranoid. Again, I was 21 years old, and this was my first job I ever got. So my first day, I literally did not even take a break. I worked so much that day, they forgot to tell me what time my break was. I was too eager to take a break because it was my first day working. So, yeah, it was that good of a day. And, I'm going to get to the funny part of my first paycheck. So here's a funny story about when I got my first paycheck. Here's something I didn't know when I got my first paycheck. Never ever take a picture of your first paycheck and put it on Facebook. Someone commented that to me and said, I know you're excited and all, but don't post your first check on Facebook. This is a friend from college who told me that, by the way. His name was Derek. Nice guy. I appreciate him for telling me that. So I took it off immediately without an exclamation, but I'm pretty sure people assumed the obvious why I took it off. And there's a funny story about that check. This story gets funny because I take my check to cash it, and I think I'm supposed, because it's my first job and my first paycheck, I don't know how it all works. I take it to Chase Bank because that's where the paycheck was from, it looked like. So I went to Chase Bank to cash the check, but they wouldn't cash it unless I opened up an account. So I opened up an account with them, and apparently it was not a good account because they were going to charge me monthly, and my family didn't think that was a good idea. They eventually caught on, and I got cashed the check, got $90, used it for some camera equipment, and I rented the movie Nightcrawler. That's the story of how I first saw Nightcrawler, but that's a story for another day. But anyway, so a few weeks go into me working at Sprouts. I'm starting to make some money for the first time. I have financial independence, and I decide to treat myself and go see a movie at the mall. And then after the mall, just kind of go window shopping. Didn't plan on buying anything. I came across a kiosk, bought a watch. Actually, I think I bought two watches. What can I say? I'm a watch guy. So, yeah, my first year was quite fun. It got interesting when I got a new roommate at a certain time, but that roommate is for a story for another day. I'm not going to tell you too much, but yeah, the first year was fun, and eventually I got this annoying coworker who at the time was into Pokemon, and this was during the time when Pokemon Go came out, which I'll tell you my stories about my Pokemon Go fascination and then how I grew it. I got over it because, it was kind of at a certain point. I think we all were overhyped and overexcited, and then later disappointed. But he wouldn't shut the fuck up about Pokemon. I tell you, his name was Ed, and I think his name was Ed, I can't remember. I know I had a supervisor named Ed. He was a cool guy, but anyway, this guy was so annoying. He annoyed the shit out of me. There was a time where after work, I accidentally knocked over a bottle of wine. He's like, "Oh, good thing you didn't knock it over while you were clocked in. You could have got fired." And I'm like, shut the fuck up. Because this kid he wasn't a kid. I think he might have been older than me, but he was annoying as... But, story for another day, annoying coworkers. I'm going to include the annoying coworkers. He was so fucking annoying. And, yeah, and I later found out he knew how to drive, and I'm like, how the fuck does that fucker know how to drive? And not me. If you met him, you would know why it's weird that he knew how to drive first. He would annoy me even when I wasn't working. My Aunt Julia defended him one time, and I'm like, Aunt Julia, this guy doesn't need defending. People bitch about their coworkers all the time. You don't need to be, I don't know. When people bitch about their coworkers, I feel they have the right to. I mean, isn't that what everyone does? Don't we all bitch about coworkers we don't like? Like Ed, I think his name was Ed. Don't know. Don't care if I'm allowed to say his actual name. But if it wasn't Ed, I'm sorry to my supervisor at the time, whose name was Ed, which he was a cool supervisor, So here's a fact about Sprouts. The regular guys, like what I was, a courtesy clerk, we wore green shirts. Basically, head cashiers, aka our supervisors, wore the bright blue shirts, and managers, they wore this dark, navy blue shirt. Maybe not navy blue, but you knew they were in charge if it was a dark blue. And if they worked there. So, I've learned how to make courtesy eyes at Sprouts, which I learned from a guy named Anthony. He taught me the proper technique to make the courtesy eyes, which is why I'm shocked they didn't have new courtesy clerks learn from him, because the way that he made courtesy ice made sure the ice wasn't loose and all over the place. It was tight, and it would stay the same shape no matter what. I don't mean to criticize techniques, but a lot of those other courtesy clerks making courtesy ice, it just seemed slap lazy to me. It seemed like they didn't do a good enough job, and I was just the only one that took the job seriously, It was my first year. What do you expect? So anyway, we get to the part where it's almost the end of the year, and it comes across to Halloween time, and I start getting a tiny, tiny bit depressed because of something that's going on behind the scenes, not at Sprouts, which I won't tell you about because it's not Sprouts related at all. So no point in telling you that part about when I worked at Sprouts. But that will be for a story for another day, and I'll tell you what was going on during this time, during the first year. But I would drink 4 beers after work. Not because of work, because of other reasons. But anyway, we get into my first day before Thanksgiving of working at Sprouts. Now, here's a fact about working the day before Thanksgiving at Sprouts. It is their busiest, it is their most harshest, and let me tell you, I am a survivor from that day. First time working that day. I used to make jokes about it on Facebook that I am going to war tomorrow. Because, let me tell you a little interesting fact. It's not busy the day of Thanksgiving at Sprouts, it's busy the day before. Customer line. Literally, the rule was our courtesy clerk there had to be at least 4 courtesy clerks working at the registers at all times during that day. And at one point, I did get a break. I mean, I did take breaks, not gonna lie. But I did get a break from taking care of registers and collected carts, which I would collect a massive amount of during my first year. I'd collect more carts than I was advised to, especially on the day before Thanksgiving. I was collecting 85 carts at once. I was rolling them in. I know I'm exaggerating a bit, but I did collect quite a bit of carts on that day. And after I got off work, let me tell you, nothing was sweeter than knowing that the day was finally over. Oh, so, interesting fact, shortly after Thanksgiving, I basically had to, I was tricked into going on a trip that I thought was going to be for a month and turned out to be for 6 months. But that's a story for another day. So I took a sabbatical from Sprouts. And by the time I was working at Sprouts again, I was depressed, sad, and ready to work. And this was, wait for it, 2016. So I started working at Sprouts again during basically April. It was April of 2016 when I was working there again. And I was depressed about something that again, is a story for another day. But we'll get into that when we cross that bridge. But yeah, here's what happened during that year. I would come to work. I'd go in the break room, just be all sad, mopey. And then I'd go on the floor and start being cheered up and optimistic, or at least looking optimistic. So my coworkers didn't know how depressed I was. So that was kind of still a good year working at Sprouts, my second year. Not exactly gonna complain, but I digress. So eventually I made a friend named Taylor. I think his name was Taylor. He was another courtesy clerk. He was kind of hippie-ish. I think his name was Taylor. Don't quote me on that. I know so many Taylors. I'm assuming it was Taylor. He had an interesting last name, I'll tell you that much. Weirdly enough, we would talk about Jim Carrey a lot. I kid you not. That's literally what most of our conversations were about, Jim Carrey. I can't emphasize you enough that literally our conversations were mostly about Jim Carrey. But anyway, it was kind of a boring year. I mean, I was still optimistic working at Sprouts. And then, I eventually got over what I was sad about. And I started making a crappy YouTube series. And actually, no, that didn't happen yet. So basically what wound up happening later that summer, I got a really, really shitty roommate named Joe. So he made me look forward to going to work because I hated being at home with that guy. He was annoying. He was rude. He was a jerk. God, I hated Joe. But that's a story for another day. Um, so basically, yeah. But by almost October, I believe it was. I believe it was October. It was either October or before October. He finally moved out, and I was no longer depressed about that thing I was depressed about. Plus, my roommate, because he was gone. Thank goodness. He was a really bad roommate, by the way. I'll tell you that much. But anyway, we get to Thanksgiving again. And let me tell you, this Thanksgiving this one was the sequel to the Thanksgiving Wars. I called them the Thanksgiving Wars because it was the day before Thanksgiving again, and I was going to war, people. War. And this one was more brutal than the year before. Especially since I had to work from 1 to 8. And let me tell you, it did not soften up. And when I got off work, I'm waiting for my ride, which at the time was a Sun van, which is a transportation for people with special needs and who are crippled and I'm just going to straight out say it, are old as fuck. So I saw a lot of geezers on that transportation. Luckily, I eventually was able to drive to work, which was, hallelujah. But, yeah, as I'm waiting, this lady comes in the parking lot and asks me to buy her an entire Thanksgiving stuff. Like $50 worth of Thanksgiving stuff. In exchange, she would clean my house. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna pass, but I'm a generous person and I'm going to give you $10 because that's how much I have in cash on me. I had more on my card, but I wasn't going to spend $50 worth of Thanksgiving stuff for a stranger. I mean, I'm not greedy. I'm just saying that was a weird request. And I feel bad about this to this day, but I kind of told my manager because I think she was trying to play at the heartstrings. Like, I think she was kind of lying a little bit just because she knew it was the holidays. And, you know, some people take advantage of that. Just saying. I mean, yeah. Plus, I was kind of a narc back then. I'm not a narc anymore. I was a different person back in those days, okay? I didn't know better. I was 22. Cut me some slack. Anyway, so basically now we're going to get into my third year working at Sprouts. 2017. And this was the year that I believe this courtesy clerk, her name was Shannon, started working for Sprouts. Now, I'm not gonna lie, at Sprouts I had my fair share of crushes on coworkers, you could call them. And she was quite the first. Not that I did anything about it, but it's an interesting story to talk about. Also, this was the year I started doing a really crappy YouTube series. I call it crappy because I'm pretty sure it was just cringe and very stupid. It was fun to make, not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun making it. But it was called Crazy Zach and Harper. If you want, I'll put a link to some of the dumb videos I made. One was a movie, but that's a story for another day, am I right? So we basically get to what I want to call just kind of a bland year, the third year. You know, it's nothing special happened that year for me. But I did start to be a little soothed by collecting cards, not gonna lie. I started collecting cards, and what that would do for me is it actually made me do a lot of thinking. And I got most of my ideas for movies from collecting cards, not gonna lie. It was fun. It was, it was my best year discovering this new thing I liked doing. And I wasn't going to stop. So, now let's get into, But I will say it was a pretty interesting year. I forgot to mention the Thanksgiving of my third year. So, Thanksgiving comes along my third year, and let me tell you, the first two were epic. This one was the one that scarred me for life. This one was where I started hating my job at Sprouts. This one turned me into the bitter man that you see before you who used to work at Sprouts. The man who gets bitter thinking about Sprouts. I'm not bitter in general, I'm just saying, when I think of Sprouts, I'm a little bitter. And this is where it started, was the third Thanksgiving I worked. So, I didn't start until 2. And I got off basically at 10. Because it was a busy one. It was the day before Thanksgiving and the day before Thanksgivings. God, I hated working there so much. Also, I should clarify, I'll tell you at the end, but now we get into 2018. So 2018 was the same year that basically I was working at Sprouts, yes, but also I met my first girlfriend and we got a little, serious. But that's a story for another day. But I'll tell you one thing. One day I wanted to stay. I was hanging out with her at her apartment, and then it occurred to me, oh shit, I'm supposed to work today. So I called my boss at the time, Walter, who sucked, by the way. I'm going to tell you right now, Walter was an asshole, straight up asshole. Interesting fact, he fired a coworker of mine because she went into labor and she didn't show up for work, and he basically fired her for that. So, yeah, this didn't happen at the time, but God, he was a fucker. I hated the hell out of that guy. I know many stories, but I call him basically to tell him I'm sick today. I can't make it into work. And then mid-sentence, he hung up on me, and I'm like, wow, what a fucker. Ugh. That's my fault for... Usually when I called in sick, I wanted to avoid talking to Walter, but it was inevitable. If I got sick, I was going to wind up telling Walter I was sick, which sucked. I hated that guy. I hated calling in sick because of him. There was a one time I went into work sick because I wanted to avoid calling in sick. You know what? I bet you $5, 3 people got sick because of me that day. I bet you $5. No, I was more careful at work when I was sick. I would go in sick sometimes, and I was careful. And this was before COVID, people, so cool your jets, okay? And funny story, this was the same year I showed up to work with a shitload of hickeys on my neck because I had a girlfriend. But, so I told a fib because a supervisor asked me, what happened? And I said, I was on a hike and an animal attacked me. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I was probably only lying about being on a hike because my girlfriend, she was a real dog, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm not bitter towards her. I mean, she looked more like a frog than a dog. Let's be honest, people. In fact, sometimes I wondered if she was a frog that was genetically engineered in a lab to look like a human. I know what, that would have been an interesting cheesy B movie in the 80s. I'm not gonna lie. The Frog. Maybe I'll do a pitch on that one day. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, eventually me and her broke up and Thanksgiving came along. And let me tell you, the fourth Thanksgiving I had to work the day before, actually not that bad. It was kind of an easier day than most of them. In comparison, this day was kind of like, if me working on Thanksgiving at Sprouts all those years was like a movie franchise, this was the Children of the Corn 7 of that franchise. In other words, it was the weakest. And I'm just saying that because that's the only sequel to Children of the Corn I saw. And I'm going to be honest, I think they should have stopped before the first one. They shouldn't have attempted to make that into a movie franchise. They shouldn't have attempted to make it into a movie. It was just awful. I did not like that movie. It was boring. And it just left a bad taste in my mouth. Kind of like when I first saw Logan for the first time, but before you boo me, I was a different person back then, okay? I was younger, I was stupider, and I didn't know better. And then I watched it a second time, and I was better, and I knew better, and I liked it. Sometimes you gotta watch a movie twice. You know, you never know. It just left a bad taste in my mouth that day. You know, so I don't know. It was the tone of the day. Sometimes the tone of a day can really ruin a movie for you. Just saying. Anyway, so I'm going to get into, yep, you guessed it, 2019. So this is the year no. I'm going to go back a bit. The year before this one was the year I met Pragmatic Addict at Sprouts. So this was the year Pragmatic Addict worked at Sprouts with me. But I feel that's a story for another day, and I'm going to call that video How Me and Pragmatic Addict Met. Anyway, this was also the same year that basically I got my worst gout attack I have ever had in my life. It was the worst. I was bedridden. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. I was in that bed for a month. Literally a month. Not gonna lie, I kind of enjoyed the time off from work. Did not enjoy being in constant pain because of the gout pain. Again, not fun having gout. Let's be honest, people. If gout is fun, you are a masochist. But I digress. So eventually I got over the gout and I was back to work. Now, let's get into 2019. So this was the year, basically, I was working at Sprouts and I met Pragmatic Addict while working here. Yeah. Anyway, So basically, I eventually got back together with my ex-girlfriend, and this is a weird summer. I'm not gonna go too into it, but let's just say, eventually working at Sprouts was the funnest time of my life, and after work I would stay in the parking lot for an extra hour, watch some stuff on Netflix, maybe catch up on some YouTube videos I am not able to watch because I was with my ex, and being with her was work, and I wanted to relax after I got off work. So I would spend an extra hour at work. I would tell her what time I would be back, or I got off work, and usually I would make it an extra hour, or I would tell her a tiny fib so I could have an hour to myself. So, yeah. But that was not a smart move. But this was also the year I broke up with her, and I luckily did not have to work the day that I was arrested, which is a story for another day. But anyway, we get into my second crush working at Sprouts. Her name was, I'm not going to say her name, but I will describe, no, I'm not going to describe anything because, I'd rather not get a interesting Facebook message later in case, Anyway. So basically I drew this party and invited her to it, and I spent a lot of money to throw this party. Pragmatic Addict made it to a party, which was cool. The sad part is she wasn't able to make it. And I looked like a dumbass throwing a party because I was trying to get her to come because she liked parties, especially with alcohol, if you catch my drift. She turned out to be a real tease. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, yeah, so this is basically the year I was starting to hate Sprouts. Like, really hate it. And I was also inspired to be a filmmaker again. So, Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving came again, and I had to work. It sucked, as per usual. So now we get into the year I think I officially quit working for Sprouts. This was 2020. So here's an interesting fact about 2020. That was when basically COVID had its peak. This was a time where essential workers were essential. And apparently I was considered an essential worker. So I was allowed out and about during certain hours in my car, I guess. I don't know. I think it was all stupid. I hated COVID. I hated working during COVID. I missed so much. You know that South Park special, the COVID special? I was basically Stan Marsh from that COVID special because I just wanted things to go back to normal again. And let me tell you, it didn't help that I got a new coworker who was an asshole named Joseph. Yeah. What is it with people named Joe turning out to be complete assholes? This guy was A total douche. I think I stood up to him one time, and it wasn't even for me. It was for another coworker. He was criticizing the coworker for being bad at collecting cards, and I was just sick of his shit. He was a stupid, spoiled, privileged 17-year-old who was a piece of shit, who eventually got fired, luckily. But here's what I really hated, and I'm going to get into a little backstory about myself. I worked for Sprouts for basically what I'm thinking was almost 6 years at this point, and never once did I get promoted. And then I find out this guy's getting promoted to grocery, a job I've been after since I first started working there. And guess why he gets the job? Guess why? I was told by management the reason he got the job was because everyone in front, basically courtesy clerks and cashiers, hated him. They complained about him. I'm like, you're promoting somebody who has a bunch of complaints about him? Why the fuck would you promote this piece of shit? I'm like, I'm dumbfounded. You promote somebody that everyone hates, and you turn down a person who worked there practically what's known as almost 10 years. That was almost 6 years of my life I gave to that company, and not once did they promote me. Not once did they ask me to be a cashier, not once did... Actually, one time I filled in for somebody in grocery, and let me tell you, that was a day, once again, I worked through my break. I didn't even take a break. That's how eager I was, because it was something new, something exciting. And never again did I work in grocery. Never again. And not once did they promote me. I did a good job that day. They told me I did a good job. I guess I didn't do a good enough job to get promoted. I guess people have to hate you in order to get promoted around there. So maybe I was doing things wrong. Maybe I should have been the guy everyone hated. Who knows? No, I'm not that person. I'm not going to become the guy everyone hates. But I'll tell you what led up to me wanting to quit this job. So the first strike was I got a job at Uber Eats, and quite frankly, I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Sprouts at the time. Strike two, during COVID, so basically I was mostly being put in charge of cleaning carts and handing customers masks, and they were nice enough to give us this little stool to sit on when it wasn't too busy and customers were not showing up. But here's what happened. This cashier who's not had no authority, who had no right, complaining, bitched about the fact that we had the courtesy of having a stool that we could sit on, and she was bitching, saying, oh, we don't get stools to sit on when we stand all day being cashiers, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you don't collect carts, you don't do go-backs, you don't collect the trash, you don't clean up around there. What the hell gives you the right to complain that a courtesy clerk is sitting on a stool every once in a while cleaning carts? You have no right to complain, lady. That's just a fact. That was strike two, because of her bitching, we weren't allowed to have that stool anymore. So, what the fuck? Like, I'm sorry, but not sorry. That was strike two for me. And here's where strike three came in, where I was really, really done with Sprouts. Strike three, here's what it was. So, my supervisor, who kept yelling at me every time a customer would sneak in without a mask. And guess how they would sneak in without a mask? I didn't have any trouble telling them to wear a mask. I would tell them to wear a mask if I was paying attention. Here's the problem. I don't have eyes in the back of my head. Do you see eyes? I don't see eyes. No eyes back here. Come on. Let's be realistic, folks. So while I'm cleaning the carts, customers walk in, and I can't hear them sometimes. They don't make any noise. And again, no eyes in the back of my head. So I'm cleaning these carts, getting them ready for customers. And apparently some sneak in without masks, and he would come at me and say, "You gotta tell them to wear a mask. You gotta tell them to wear a mask." I'm like, you know what? If you want us to tell them to wear a mask, that's fine. But you know what? Don't act like we have eyes in the back of our head. Oh, and here's an idea. Have two of us working up there. So when one of us is cleaning the carts, maybe that person can tell them to wear a mask. Huh? Or maybe don't tell us to clean carts. Maybe we don't clean carts. Maybe customers should just be responsible and wear gloves when they enter, you know? And we had to change our gloves every 15 minutes, which was just a pain in the ass. I was starting to hate this job. I was done. And to be honest, I think I actually quit around 2021. That's actually when I think I quit. But let me tell you something. The day I quit was the saddest day of my life, because here's the funny thing. Somebody who is my supervisor and started off as a head cashier, who is kind of like the person who guided me through my entire job. I'm not going to say her name for obvious reasons. She was the nicest person I knew working there, and she was the one I felt deserved to be the one I give the 2 weeks notice to and the letter of resignation. I felt so sad because she was one of the few people I was going to miss there. To be honest, by the time I quit, Pragmatic Addict was long gone from that job. He quit a while ago, so there was no worrying about missing him because we see each other all the time, as you all know, and we are quite the best friends, so there was no worry there. We didn't lose touch. Sound like summer camp people. But yeah, the day I quit, I spent my final paycheck buying some Chipotle, and I went home and I watched Office Space. And let me tell you, that was my odyssey. Working at Sprouts was my personal odyssey. And you know what? That one good thing came from this odyssey, and I'll tell you what it is. It inspired a horror movie. It inspired a horror movie that I'm working on right now. And you know what? If I had a time machine and I could change anything, it definitely wouldn't be working at Sprouts, because this horror movie is something that I'm passionate about making right now, and I love every minute of it. What I did not love was working at Sprouts. So here's my tip to you guys who work at Sprouts and you're all optimistic, excited, thinking you're going to one day be promoted. Just remember, you might not get promoted, and you might wind up quitting, and you might wind up saying what I wish I could have said to my boss, Randy, who worked there. Take this job and shove it. But, you know, I'm free. I don't work for Sprouts anymore. I have nothing to fear anymore. I don't have anything I have to worry about waking up for. Every morning was hell for me. I had to be up, ready to go to work when I worked there. It was stressful. I didn't make my own hours. I couldn't pick when I could work. But now, I pick when I work. I work when I want. And I never felt happier doing so. But that is the end of the Sprouts Farmers Market Odyssey. And until next time, stay tight. Also, feel free to check out my other channel where I review movies, do trailer reactions. Sometimes I do pitch videos, and sometimes I do shot reaction videos where I take shots and react to YouTubers' videos.